Hey, it's Webs here with a chaotic way to end out the United In Stormwind set. The deck idea that I've been meaning to actually make a deck with since the Deadmines Mini-set, aka Deck of Chaos. And the reasoning behind that is Hullbreaker, which draws your Deck of Chaos out of the deck. And because Deck of Chaos is your only spell in the entire deck, you're guaranteed it, thus meaning you're technically running 3 copies of Deck of Chaos in the deck instead of just 1, while also using spell generating minions early game to actually generate some answers so you can survive longer turns, and not focusing completely on the higher cost minions so you can actually have an early game plan until you draw into the Deck of Chaos or the Hullbreakers. For the Mulligan guide, it's really simple for this deck. If you see Deck of Chaos or Hullbreaker in your opening hand, keep them always, unless you already have an additional copy of Hullbreaker in that hand or the Deck of Chaos itself. You're always going to want to have the Deck of Chaos over a Hullbreaker. The other cards you want to keep in your opening hand are the 1 through 3 cost minions in the deck. These will all allow you to have early game plans so you can actually survive until you can actually play the Deck of Chaos. Some honorable mentions of cards that are decent enough to maybe consider keeping in your opening hand are Spice Bread Baker, Titled Customer, and Goldshire Knoll. These are the only higher cost cards besides the Deck of Chaos that you'd actually want to consider keeping in your opening hand. Everything else, you want to try to make sure they're in your deck when you actually activate Deck of Chaos, since Deck of Chaos doesn't affect cards in your hand, which is kind of depressing and the main drawback of the card, which is why we're running a bunch of cheap minions just so we can easily access that Deck of Chaos and have some type of answer. With that being said though, let's get into some games. Alright, time for a game against Warrior. Deck of Chaos in the opening hand, that's actually really good. The other 2 cards we're going to mulligan away though. Drawing into a Loot Hoarder, which is pretty good for a turn 2 play. Then the Colossus exists. Tour Guide is a really good turn 1 and our only turn 1 play. I probably shouldn't have actually hero powered. I should have just saved it for after I played the Deck of Chaos, but oh well. Envoy, that's interesting. I'm going to play the Loot Hoarder and then we drew into a Scorpid. I honestly probably should have triggered the Envoy right there, but oh well. So they are Rush Warrior, probably. Titled Customer is actually pretty good. Grabbing the Final Grasp. We're going to try to get the 1/1 off of the board with it. Just going to pass the turn. We could have hero powered, but I want to minimize the risk of actually losing. They're going to generate something off of the Scorpid. Spice Bread Baker is actually really strong here. Like really strong for a top deck. Though we could have went for a more greedy play with Deck of Chaos this turn, but I think the Spice Bread Baker should probably be the way we go, along with the Final Grasp on the 3/1, just because it will give us some type of board advantage. And then next turn we can also use Entitled Customer to just board wipe. Conditioning, interesting. A second Pride Leader. Sure, attack with the 7/4. It's just what we need. Alright, time for the Entitled Customer. The Overlord shouldn't be that much of a shock, but it's interesting to actually see there. We should have stabilized enough to actually play the Deck of Chaos this turn. Next turn we should be able to null and put down a taunt, I think. Actually, I guess it all depends on what we top deck. Though that is a really scary minion right now. Oh, clowns. I mean, there's the greedy play and there's the not greedy play. Playing the 3/9/4 clowns is probably the safest bet to actually go. We could have actually rocked the clowns just through the strongman or envoy, but that probably doesn't make us actually survive the turn. And because the Rush Warrior, I doubt they're actually playing that many board clears. We still do have the null, so we can actually still do a bunch of damage with our... Okay, that is not a minion I expected. I'm gonna play the Null and a Taunt, which gets rid of one of their minions. Though the fact that they still have the Overlord on board is kind of scary. Though if we do survive till next turn, we do have 2 of our Scrap Colossus, which means we should be able to actually do a lot there. Dark Moon Rabbit's actually pretty good. They're actually kind of smart with the positioning on how they did minions on board, just for the fact that they can't get nuked by the rabbit on this turn. But we do have 2 taunts out on board, so we should survive. Technically 3 taunts, actually. The second Envoy, that's kind of scary, but it isn't the worst thing for us to have that on the board, just for the fact that Overlord could have been buffing something lot more frightening than a Envoy. And again, the positioning on where they put the Envoy is actually pretty good. I'll give them credit there. Hullbreaker, which does absolutely nothing, but we do have the second elemental. And we win. Alright, time for a game against Demon Hunter. The only card in this hand that we actually want to keep is the Baker, and we don't even want to keep that much. Null is kind of okay to have, but Ysera is kind of depressing to have in the opening hand. I love the skin that I bought for Warlock. I just couldn't pass up on it. Going to hero power. Envoy's not bad. The Hullbreaker is really good to have here. Wait, their quest line? Why would you wait till turn 3 to actually play the quest line? I get that maybe against a Paladin matchup with a bunch of secrets, but against Warlock, that just doesn't make sense. Well, we're going to play our Hullbreaker, which draws us our deck of Chaos. And they think they're going to do a bunch of damage here, but they don't. So are they Soul Questline Demon Hunter? I haven't done anything with Soul Demon Hunter in a while. Maybe I'll try to do that too. I don't think it's a good deck to actually try given some of the recent support, but who knows. Need for Greed. Still my favorite card from the mini set. I mean, at least artwork wise and name wise, I guess. Okay, they play a Brute, which sucks. And the fact that we have both clowns also kind of sucks, but I should play the Null first and then the Baker, so we can actually play both on the same turn, but I misplayed there. This hand is looking actually not that bad. We have a turn 7 play and a turn 8 and more play too. Only downside is we have no way to trigger the clowns in our hand now. They're just going to do normal questline Demon Hunter shit. Spectral Sight. Playing the Colossus with 10 attack. The hardest thing about this deck is actually surviving until you get the Deck of Chaos out. But given the fact that you're actually technically running 3 copies of Deck of Chaos, that's actually a lot easier of a task than you'd actually originally think. Alright, they're going to try to kill the Colossus. Oh right, they have Cthulhu. I forgot they had Cthulhu. Actually, that gives me a horrible idea for a deck that I could have done. Oh well, I'll try that out towards the end of Fractured and Alteract Valley, I guess. Getting the Scorpid, playing the Envoy, then playing a Scorpid. Seeing what we get off of this. Wicked Whispers is honestly probably the best bet here. Though we don't want to actually destroy the Null. And the Entitled Customer would be nice to also keep in our hand. Okay, a Lion's Frenzy. That could be scary in theory, but eh. So, the good news is we can play the Null and get the Whispers. The bad news is if we do that, we lose one Entitled Customer no matter what. I don't think we need an Entitled Customer from this point in the game. Still sucks that that's the card that we're going to lose, though. Because what can Demon Hunter actually do here? Like, seriously, the biggest thing they could do is put out a humongous wall of brutes. But at the same time, even if they did that, we still have way more card advantage in our hand and in our deck than they can actually outdo as a class. Glide, that actually does nothing for us. Oh wait, it didn't actually trigger our hand either, so I guess we're still fine. I'm assuming that they're trying to get the brutes from their deck. Or maybe they're trying to get the charge legendary that I can't remember his name right now that ignores taunt. That could actually be a way they could win, theory. Okay, that glide actually did that. Well, there's one brute, and they're just going to attack. I guess they didn't get the card that they needed. We'll just play the Utinus, grabbing nothing out of their hand. Oh well. And then they give up. Alright, time for a game against Mage. Not the worst starting hand that I've ever seen with this deck. Gonna mulligan away the two bigger minions. Getting a tour guide, that's actually really good. Though getting the Colossus kind of sucks. You know, Warlock now has 2 mech alternate skins for their hero. And yet, there's not that many mech minions in Warlock itself. Just kind of an interesting thought. Okay, we have a turn 2 play. Grabbing the Mortal Coil just in case. The Wicked Whispers honestly would have probably been the better bet there, but oh well. Okay, so it is an Ice Barrier. Another secret. That one is probably Ice Barrier, to be honest. Yeah, they have Frost and Arcane done. So we're going to test what the other one is. If it was Counterspell, that would have been actually better, but oh well. I'm going to play the Hullbreaker. I should have actually attacked with the Pandoran and then drew a card off of the Mortal Coil, but oh well. We do have Deck of Chaos on turn 5, which is great. Okay, Fireball. Joke's on you, you're not going to get any damage out of that. Snap Freeze. I don't know why you're running that in your main deck, but oh well. I'm not going to make that decision for you. Like, I get it. It's a decent enough. Actually, they might be Frost Questline. But why would you be Frost Questline? There's no payoff for that. Rabbit, that's kind of funny to draw. So it is another Ice Barrier. I'm gonna grab the Ritual of Doom since the other 2 options don't really get us anything. Then we're just gonna place a taunt down. Flame Strike. Oh wait, it's randomly generated. That's less of a shock than I thought it was going to be. Hullbreaker, which literally does nothing. Envoy's going to be cool here though. Going to Hero Power. Getting a Null that costs 0. Kind of wish I had played the Envoy before Deck of Chaos, just because I know for a fact that they would try to kill the Envoy. Hot Strike, not really a good card, but oh well. At least not in this deck. I guess it's a cheap, easy trigger for the questline. Flurry, okay, so they're going to slow us down a bit. Now, we do have the Rabbit, but I don't really want to use it on the 7/7. But at the same time, what other minions are we going to actually use this thing on? I had a brief thought of another Flame Strike, but then I remembered it was a randomly generated Flame Strike, so I didn't have to worry about that. Could still have a Fire Cell, I guess. That could almost wipe out our board. Refreshing Spring Water. There's the Fire Cell. That's not what we wanted to see, but it should be expected from Questline Mage. While we do have a bunch of big minions, it is kind of scary to actually think how much damage Questline Mage can actually do even after the nerfs one turn. Akama is probably the worst prime that we could have actually got. Actually, no, in this matchup, he's probably one of the better primes. The Importer's a nice top deck. I don't think the Philosophy is ever going to probably pop up in this game, but we can duplicate the Hullbreakers if we really feel like it. Fireball, that's kind of getting us low. Interesting, they're actually using Conjured Mana Biscuit in Questline Ball deck. Maybe they have the legendary that increases your spell power every time you cast a spell. That could be actually pretty frightening. Deck of Lunacy, okay. That's another card that I forgot existed for a while. And probably for good reason. They did nerf it into the ground, so no one's actually playing it. Though, Big Spell Mage could actually, in theory, use it, just because the spells that are actually played would still count as big spells for the things like the Parrot, and is actually an idea to maybe try out in the future. Who knows? If there's a consistency factor between some of the other Mage spell cards and the Parrot, then there might actually be a deck between Deck of Lunacy and them. Okay, Mana Biscuit. Ross is not something that we want to see. We're going to have to do some weird shit with their board. that I don't want to actually do. Or we can do that. I guess this is not as weird as I originally thought I was having to do. Because the original thought was, oh hey, use the entitled customer and then be good to go. Also, we did technically miss lethal by choosing the Mortal Coil over the Wicked Whispers so early on in the game, but who would have known that this would have been the scenario? We're so close to lethal, but they're so close to it too. Like really close. So is this my deck list from before? Can't be, right? If it is, then I think this might have actually saved my life. Deck of Lunacy created a Mask of Cthulhu, which actually won us the game. Alright, now that we're through some games, let's discuss how well the deck did and why I built the deck the way I did. So the deck actually performed incredibly well from what I expected. I actually played this deck a lot more than I usually do with some of the other decks that I test out. I almost had 40 games played with this and it had a 50% win rate. It might be because there's not that many people playing before the new set comes out, or it could just be because the deck actually catches a lot of people off guard. I don't know. But it's a really fun deck to play, and I had a lot of fun testing it out. It actually went through one other iteration before this, at least during this last week. I had tried to make this deck work a few times in the past before, but I ended up giving up on it pretty quickly. And this time I think I made a much more stable build than my previous builds. The original idea was to use Hullbreakers to either draw power or Deck of Chaos out of the deck, but I came to soon realize that Hullbreaker would be just better to grab a Deck of Chaos and nothing else out of the deck, which is why I ended up including the Pandoran Importers and the Scorpids as ways to actually generate early game responses against your opponent and not forced you to actually draw something else off of Hullbreaker. And I think this actually improved the consistency factor of the deck by quite a bit. I also considered a more corrupt package within the deck, using Yishari as the winning card instead of N'Zoth, but between the fact that N'Zoth actually gains benefit from using it with Deck of Chaos, and Tictus actually getting a downgrade if you use it with Deck of Chaos, I ended up not going with the corrupt package instead. Sure, there's remnants of it in this deck, such as the Clowns and Strongmans, but these cards are just really good targets for Deck of Chaos anyways, and I honestly would not probably cut them. The only thing I might cut is the Strongmans for a Battleground Battlemaster, which is something I considered, but in the end I thought that that would make the deck a little bit too top heavy if I cut the Strongman or the Envoy for a Battleground. And if you're not playing your Clowns or N'Zoth, you don't actually swarm the board that much, so I didn't see the need for a Battleground Battlemaster. Same reason why I didn't include Broomsticks over the tour guide. I wanted some additional draw power early on, and this was the better one-drop minion for this. And the inclusion of the one Dark Moon Rabbit actually came up a lot more than I ever would have expected. Well, even more so than Ysera, just because of the fact that your hand was usually full most of the time anyways, and Ysera would not always generate you all 5 cards because of that. But a Dark Moon Rabbit would actually allow you to clear out a bunch of minions on the board, and if you could revive it off of the N'Zoth, that would make it even better. With that being said, even though it's one day before the new set comes out, I could honestly recommend making this deck if you have all the cards already. It is really fun to play, and it actually is a lot more consistent than I would have ever expected. And like always, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and until next time, bye bye.